Alright, so hey guys, we're going to be working on the second mug today, or for this video. We're going to be doing it a little bit different today. We're still going to be using a regular HB pencil or number 2 pencil, such as this one. And we are going to be doing this so that we don't blend it, so that the marks we make are somewhat shown, so that it gives it a different feel and a different texture to the drawing. And otherwise, it's same principles for everything. Something else we're going to be doing different is once I get the shadow drawn, I'm going to lay a paper towel down for my hand to rest on, so that as I'm working, or as we're working, the graphite is not coming onto my hand. And so it just keeps it from smudging onto the paper, and it keeps it from smudging onto my hand to make it sure that it looks more professional, more thought out, and, well, less smudged, for lack of a better term. And let's get started. So I'm going to be starting on the cast shadow like in the previous video. And for this one, I'm going to be doing little circles. So I'm literally just making little circles with my pencil. And I'm doing it relatively dark, right next to the thing, right next to the cup. Paper spent. And I'm doing little lines to speed up the process. But I'm going to be going over the lines with the circles to make it more gradiated, or to make it seamless between the change in the values of the shadow. And like always, make sure you have a sharp pencil, because if you try to do this with a dull one, you're going to be experiencing some problems. And you just do little circles. If you're working on something like a notebook or something, be careful with the edges of the paper, because if it's bent off, or if you're working on a notebook, something that can happen is you can catch the edge, not the ed, and make the edge darker than you want it. And it's completely okay if you want that to happen. It's completely understandable if that happens. But you do want to be careful when working on edges and so forth. And you're just doing little circles. And like I said in the previous video, the farther out you go with the shadow, the lighter it gets. And this goes for almost all drawn shadows. Some drawn shadows keep their the same value throughout it, but for the purpose of well, it being a video for beginners, and such, we're just going to make this, we're just going to make this clear. Really, Cosmo, you're going to walk into the window and block my sun in the middle of the video. Alright. That's the cat for you. Yeah, you can still see it. And what I'm doing is just adding a little pressure and slowly moving it out, continuing the circular pattern that I'm doing with the pencil. You don't have to do a circular pattern. I find it easier to do a circular pattern, especially when I want to blend it out easily and make it seem more seamless. Working, and I want to keep the texture of the lead. Get that thing off. And you can make it, you can make the circles long, but if you do the long version, make sure you're doing it very, very light, and keep consistency with it. I'm not scribbling or anything, I'm simply doing light circles with the pencil, just adding a little bit more graphite to it each time I pass. And it's literally going little by little. And so that's our shadow. I'm going to get the paper towel because I want to do the background. The dots we're going to do last, and we're going to touch up the lines up here. Really, Cosmo? Really? If you erase something or you notice your lines aren't dark enough for you, go ahead and retouch them up, like I just did, keeping it light. But yeah. And so we are going to be working on the background. Again, I'm just doing the diagonal lines for this. If you do an object like a mug, it's important to make sure that even if it's just a tiny little crevice or crack and you can see through it to the background, have the background visible through that as well. Because otherwise it's going to be like seeing an arm and then it's just nothing behind the arm. Like if I were to hold out my hand and all these little spots in between my fingers and so forth, there was just nothing, it wouldn't add any depth or dimension to the hand. But with everything behind it, you can see the depth, you can see the dimension, you can clearly see that my hand is separate from the background. And so that's always important to make sure that you keep your consistency, and if you draw something for the background, you need to make sure it keeps its trajectory, and you need to make sure that it keeps its form throughout the object and throughout the background. So that's why I like to start with backgrounds and like floors and so forth, because that way I can keep it consistent throughout the entire image. And if it needs to be touched up, I can just go back to it. If you do it towards the end of a project or towards the end of the drawing, you're less likely to be able to go back to it because all your time and energy was spent on the object rather than making sure that the background looked believable or up to par. And if you do take art next year or the year after or like sometime in your life, know there are set dates. And if you're asked to do something in a certain time, you are most likely going to have to do it in that time frame. And if you don't, you're not going to make that up. It's going to be oh, sorry, that's just gone. And that's especially true with high school and college. The thing with the paper towel or paper or whatever you have here to have your hand on, you need to make sure it doesn't move, because if it moves, it will most likely smudge the paper and move beneath it and mess with the drawing and so forth. And I especially use this type of thing with like charcoal. And with charcoal, everything changes the look of charcoal. It rubs off on everything. And so you can seriously mess up your drawing. Or not. You can say it's part of the drawing. It really depends. And some people might believe you. And then you go, oh, that was actually, like, not true. I just didn't want to admit it. They will go, well, I believed you. Or they will say, I didn't really believe you, but okay. Depending on where you take art, you may get marked down for neatness. So it's always good to just try to keep your work neat. That way it's better for you, because you can say, oh, how could you not see it? I made it so neat and clear. And then sometimes you can actually, like, depending on what you smudge or how you blend it, it can either help or hurt. There is a thing as over smudging. When your object clearly morphs into the surroundings and it loses that crisp feel, that's when you know you flunked. You messed up the project. But when you've got that smoothness, and it's also clearly separate from the surroundings, like this is clearly separate from the surroundings so far, or even the previous one was clearly separate from the surroundings, it can seriously help you. And so it really depends on like how you do certain things. It also depends on the teacher, because some teachers will like tell you, okay, I want you to do this, this, and this. And then some teachers will say, oh, it's up to you, but it would look better if you did this. And so it really... Oh, I just touched the camera. And so it really depends on the teacher you have for what they want. Because I've had both types of teachers. I've had teachers tell me, oh, I want this specifically. If it's not this, I will not grade it. I've had teachers say, oh, we'll just go with what feels right. And so it really just, it depends on who's your instructor. Some just give you a rubric and say, okay, I want you to follow these guidelines of, is it creative? Is it unique? Does it follow what we went over when we talked about the project in class? And that's the other thing. Pay attention to your teachers when they're talking to you in class. Even if you've already like been over the subject, because they'll sometimes discuss the projects that they want you to do. So I had this one teacher, and she was talking about color, specifically analogous colors. And this one kid in my class just wouldn't stop talking during her little lecture thing about analogous colors, because the person was Art 3 and was thinking, oh, I don't need to listen to this, I've already learned this. And so she added in a little snippet just for the one project that we were doing on analogous colors. And the little snippet was, I want you to make a symbol that represents everything that you are. So I did a triskelion of sorts, a music note, and a yin-yang. And those were my symbols. She said you could make 1 or 3. I made 3. And the kid was looking at all of our different symbols and so forth, along with our pottery, because we were doing a pottery thing and then watercolor background. And he was just like, what's with all the different symbols? And she stood up and said, don't tell him. If he wasn't listening during the lecture, he doesn't need to know. So, word of warning, do not be that kid. So if somebody's like giving a lecture about something, make sure you pay attention, even if you think you already know it, because they might add in a snippet of something important. Anyway, that's just my little 2-cent thing. Word of warning. That's my word of warning. Anyway, let's go on to the mug. I'm going to start with the inside of the mug. Like I said previously, I'm very careful with moving my paper towel and holding it down. So if I need to move it, I literally take it up with one hand and carefully place it with both. And I'm careful not to like slide it or move it. And because the light is coming down from this way, we will be shading this part lighter and this part darker. and then it will be vice versa on the actual outside of the mug. This side will be darker, this side will be lighter. And then the lightest part will be the dots. So we'll do the dots absolutely last. And I'm doing the little circles inside. I'm not scribbling. I'm doing literally little tiny circles. And I'm doing it with the side of my pencil. So it gets the greatest amount of pencil. I'm not doing it directly downward. I'm not doing it literally pressing the side against it. I'm just angling it so that it's got a good portion of the pencil. And something I didn't mention, I think, last time was if you need to move the pencil around, like if you need to go from this side or from this side or from the top area, like I'm doing right now, you can completely do that. It is entirely up to you with what you feel is more comfortable. Because if you only want to do like a certain style or a certain type of move, it might require you to go in at the paper from different angles. So it might cause you to go from the paper at one point from this angle or from this angle or like upside down. I don't know. I'm not you. I don't know your comfort level. So it's completely okay if it's not exactly how I'm doing this. This is just me showing you some bits and pieces I've learned. And if you like accidentally dot it somewhere, it's completely okay. You're most likely going to cover it up with pencil. If you can't cover it up, try to erase as much as possible. Using an eraser or something. Do not use whiteout. Even if you're working with pen, please do not use whiteout. It does not work out well. Then just going back over, doing my little circles. I'm not doing it super heavy with the pencil. I'm just going over it multiple times with the pencil. Again, not going super hard, just going over it multiple times with the pencil to get that varying shade gradually moving across. And if you're doing the moving it correctly, you shouldn't have any rub off on your paper towel or paper. You might have a little bit, but that's okay. But it should be fairly crisp when you take it up. Again, I'm not scribbling, I'm doing little circles. Just touch that up. Again, not scribbling, doing little circles. I'm making the back of the handle especially dark. This one I did press hard, especially right around here, because I wanted to keep the handle separate from the actual cup. But otherwise, I'm just going lightly with the pencil in little circles. By the end of this video, you're going to be tired of hearing the term little circles. Touch up down here so that it's darker. And I made this part darker because it's beneath the handle, and then I lightened it as I came up. I'm going to be touching up right along here. And it's literally just going with the feel of the shadows. How do you think the shadow would look? In what direction do you think it would look? But also make sure to keep that highlighted edge, to make sure that it's different from the background and also the shadow. Also make sure that you're staying at a light angle. You're not pressing down too hard. It's quite literally just going over it multiple times with the same pressure and so forth. That way you're not taking it too far. You can literally just go a little bit at a time. And it may be a tedious process, but you will be happy with the outcome. I realize I'm not as talkative in this one. I'm just trying to focus because sometimes it's better if you need to focus to just focus. I realize I'm still rambling even though I'm also focusing. Again, little circles, no scribbles. Just little baby circles. Which reminds me, for the next video, we will be doing circles. We will be making a 2D circle, in other words, the outlines, and we will make it a 3D sphere with shading and all. And it will be relatively the same as this, except slightly different. For that one, I will be showing you how to draw it and map it out. And I think I'm actually going to leave the dots be because they, again, are the lightest part of this piece other than the highlights and the rims. So they actually do need to stay relatively light colored and prominent. The best way to do that is to just leave them be. If you need to touch up around the dots, go right ahead. I'm doing that because it can sometimes be very hard to see. And that way it stands out a bit more. Some teachers get irritated when you do this. I actually prefer doing this. So, again, it depends on the teacher. Because not every teacher is the same. Some will like it, some will not. Some will say it's up to the artist, aka you or I. So it really just depends on the teacher you get. And now for the handle. Now because the handle, this part of the handle is the shadow, I'm just going to make it completely dark and just go very, very hard with my pencil to make it very, very prominent, because this is the shadow. And it's up to you whether you want to do the shadow of the handles. And by shadow of the handles, I mean this part. I do it because more times than not, the handle is reflected in the actual thing, and it's a darker look than the rest. But it's completely up to you. Yeah. That's our mug. And then the previous one. I hope you enjoyed these two tutorials. I will be back with another tutorial of doing spheres. I hope you are having a wonderful day. Bye-bye.